Trump will lose his war with Iran because he didn't start it as a strategic act. Let's begin by looking at the Trump administration's reasons for war, which are a post-truth mess. More troubling is what sits underneath that mess, and we'll get to that shortly. So, the war is to defend America from an imminent threat.
I think they were going to attack first.
The war is to bring regime change.
When we are finished, take over your government.
The war is not about regime change, except when it is.
This is not a so-called regime change war. But the regime sure did change.
The war is to destroy Iran's conventional weapons capacity.
Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production.
The war is to obliterate Iran's nuclear program, which was already obliterated 6 months ago.
And they will never have nuclear weapons.
After US action last year, Trump said Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated.
And the most Orwellian one, the war is to stop Iran from attacking us in response to us attacking them by attacking them first.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. We knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
I think they were going to attack first. I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
This is a Putinesque level of post-truth communication. But as we'll see in a moment, Trumpism goes deeper into post-truth than Putinism. Putinism uses a bag of contradictory lies to obscure its real trajectory, which is the ruin of our democracies and the collapse of Ukraine's governability. Trump, on the other hand, has no destination. The disturbing reality is that it's not just Trump's words that are untethered from the real world, but his actions too. Before we explain this, I want to tell you a story. So it's 2002, and I went to see my member of parliament, who was a minister in the Labour government, to discuss the potentially upcoming Iraq war. We had a conversation for about 45 minutes or an hour. There were 2 or 3 of us in the room. The conversation went well, but we clashed. I clashed with the minister over what I felt were each of 2 incompatible reasons for war that he was giving. I felt that he was saying that we needed to invade Iraq to stop Iraq using weapons of mass destruction that it already had, and that we needed to invade Iraq to stop it from developing weapons of mass destruction, which it didn't yet have. And I said, Minister, I'm hearing 2 incompatible things here. Each of these contradicts the others. What do we do? We had a clash. The minister felt there wasn't that much of a contradiction. I felt there was. But I walked out of that room feeling that that was my first ever experience of post-truth politics. And it's 25 years later, almost, and journalistic institutions have still not learned how to deal with speech like this properly. If you take Trump's reasons for war and assess them or debunk them one by one individually, you're going to fall into Trump's trap. What you should do instead is focus on their incoherence and highlight how their incoherence is in fact abusive of citizens. You wouldn't accept this kind of behavior in another professional environment. If your accountant asked you how much is the new office you're building for your small business, and you said it's 100K, it's free, it's $1 million, and it's the price of the rings of planet Saturn, your accountant would say, I'm sorry, but I don't want to work with you anymore. And now we get to the second sense of post-truth. Not post-truth in how you justify action in your communication, but post-truth in action itself. Underneath Trumpism's post-truth saturation of the informational environment, we don't see a strategy. What we see is a cabal of political entrepreneurs, Fox TV hosts, podcasters, Mar-a-Lago courtiers, billionaires, all led by a president with a personality disorder and no plan. And it's not just that they don't know what they're doing, many of them are hooked on neo-fascist buzzwords about action, power, destruction, explosions, without any reference to the real world. So Pete Hegseth's clowning is not a facade, it's actually the essence of Trumpist foreign policy. To make sense of this, we've got to do some psychology. And this is the problem with Trump. He forces us into interdisciplinary explanation. Middle East and foreign policy experts can map for us the consequences of Trump's actions, but they struggle to explain why he's doing what he's doing. In my 2025 video, The Real Reason Trump Submits to Putin, I argued that Trump is driven by an insatiable need for narcissistic supply. There is positive narcissistic supply. Think of how Trump elevates Putin as an exalted object and bathes in his glow. And there is a negative narcissistic supply. Think of how Trump positions himself as master of Zelensky's destiny and draws energy from inflicting pain without consequence. Unfortunately, the theatrics of war combine both of these fantasies of omnipotence. First, there is positive omnipotence. Look at how much I control as king of the world. Except for the parts of the world that Vladimir controls. And I called Vladimir very strongly today 17 times. And he said that I was doing a tremendous job in Iran. And I did an even better job. Many people are saying the best job in Venezuela. I'm going to call him again. Donny, you've called him 74 times today. I think that's enough. He does think you're doing a great job. And I might call him again tomorrow because he might say something really strong, very big, very strongly. But Donny, that's enough. Second is destructive omnipotence. This is not about your ships, your planes, your missiles achieving a political goal, but about a fantasy about your capacity for destruction. And Trump has been disturbingly accessible during the war, and journalists have been calling him, and he's been asking them, how do you like the spectacle? The tragedy is that millions of lives have to live and die inside that Trumpian fantasy. And every time that happens, US power diminishes. So what we've just done is arrive at a second sense of post-truth. In the first familiar sense, post-truth as communication, language stops tracking the world. You still have a real plan, but you obscure it. You leave the house to buy raspberries at the grocer's, but when people ask you where you're going, you say, I'm going to the pharmacy, I'm going to the park, I'm going to planet Jupiter. In the second sense, post-truth action, your actions themselves stop tracking the world. You walk out of the house and you say you're going to the park, to the pharmacy, to planet Jupiter, but in fact, you just walk in circles and then you try to buy a toilet brush in a bookshop. Now, think about how this relates to Iran. Israel is the strategic leader in this operation. It's through Trump's lack of character that Israel has been able to pull the United States into the war. And I don't mean bad character, although that's true too. I mean no character, because narcissists do not have a self. When they look inside, they see nothing except an inexhaustible thirst for further narcissistic supply. Just like there is no real Putin in Trump's thinking about Putin, so there is no real Iran in Trump's thinking about Iran. Iran is just a surface to be used for the extraction of narcissistic supply. Now, this is an odd kind of imperialism, narcissism-driven imperialism. It is a kind of imperialism that is practiced by empires in decline. So what are the political implications of this? First of all, being bombarded by the administration of Fox TV hosts, podcasters, political entrepreneurs, Mar-a-Lago courtiers, led by a president with a personality disorder and no plan, does not tend to produce democracy on the ground or any other constructive transformation. The extraordinary Gertrude Bell, the archaeologist and political officer who was in Iraq in the 1910s and the 1920s, would teach us that regime change by outsiders who don't understand the social fabric of the state they're trying to change is a recipe for disaster. And she'd remind us in particular to distinguish between a regime and a state, because in many cases it's impossible to destroy the regime without also destroying the state. And by the way, the destruction and collapse of the Iranian state is something that the Israeli government is certainly open to causing. Now, the moving picture matters less for this video, but as we recorded, oil prices are rising, the war has spread to 12 countries, and Iran has installed Mojtaba Khamenei to succeed his father as supreme leader. We don't know how long he'll last in life or in power, but the message to the Trump administration is, we will outlast you. And by now, Trump is still half drunk on the theatrics of war, but half furious at the fact that he's now stuck without a clear exit strategy. Number 2, Trumpism will collapse. It is too tied up with the infantilized deformations of a particular man's personality. As the wonderful John Gray likes to say, Trump's personality resonated deeply with a part of the American unconscious. But it will be gone. But Trumpism being gone, and this is really important because you've got to keep two things in mind here, please. Trumpism being gone does not make post-truth authoritarianism an historical aberration, a kind of abyss in between two fields of flowers under a blue sky. In reality, Trumpism is a warm-up act for the more serious authoritarianism to come in the 2030s. We have to get ready, and listen out, Democrats in America, we have to get ready for a Trump that has a clarity of vision about what he wants to do, a clarity of vision about his own interests, a clarity of vision about how disciplined and focused and single-minded you need to be if you're to destroy democracy. Number 3, Trump's attack on Iran is an expression of US imperial decline, which is tragic because for all of the unlovely things US imperialism has done, it's also been constructive. We have been relying on it to defend Europe from the maniacal imperialist aggression of the Kremlin, for instance. Now, Trump promised the opposite, and he deceived people who lacked the emotional intelligence to see through him. Hello? No, I don't have any need to mention Neil Ferguson at this point. No. Bye. But in reality, he revived the neoconservative fetish for permanent war, only now pursued with a kind of lunatic amateurism, and consigned to a sphere of influence rather than applied to the whole world. The amateurish neoconservatism certainly doesn't apply to Russia. The US is now drifting toward becoming an illiberal power. For now, no figure in domestic American politics can offer depolarization via national renewal and take the country beyond technocratic liberalism without lapsing into post-truth authoritarianism. Moreover, if somebody like that materialized, might they not discover in the 2030s that America is by now Soviet America? A declining empire where the levers of power are now powerless, and pulling them with responsible boldness no longer yields political results. Like a disconnected steering wheel. You can turn it, but the wheels keep going where they were going before. Europe faces the same dilemma in its domestic politics. And the West as a whole, helped by Trump's disgraceful threats against his allies, is drifting to a place where it can no longer project itself as a coherent force in the world. Now, if you really want to understand Trump's narcissism, see how his inner world works and how somebody like Putin can manipulate it, watch this video next.